Saints Cowboys betting preview, ladies and gentlemen. Today on this video, we will be going over some very serious, advanced, high-level betting statistics, analytics, and data to try and find the best bets for the New Orleans Saints versus the Dallas Cowboys in Week 2 of the NFL. Okay, so I have a few things pulled up here. I have VSiN, their Vegas odds board, which is what you're looking at right now. I also have the VSiN betting splits, which we'll go over. And then I have DraftKings. We have the numbers available from DraftKings. I have some composite power rankings. Then we have the box scores from the previous week. So we're going to go through all of this. We're going to do this kind of live together just so y'all can see some of the things that I look for with this. Now, listen, this is not a hot take video. This video is about sports betting. This video is about finding these numbers. So if you're interested in how this all works, drop a comment below if you have any questions or whatever. I'll try and explain it as we go along. So right here is the odds board. So what we're looking at is we have the opener from DK, okay, DraftKings. Then we have the current odds at DK, Circa, South Point, Golden Nugget, Westgate, Win, and Stations, and BetMGM. So for the Saints and the Cowboys, it opened at 6. Can y'all see that? Yeah. So it opened at 6. All right. So it's sitting pretty much 6 flat. There is a 6.5 at Win. What I look for here is some of the sharper books like Circa. If Circa was going to 6.5, then I would assume the rest of the books were going to go to 6.5. So if I wanted Dallas, I would take a look at the 6s because I would assume the number's going to go up. Now, something else I like to do is kind of look at the odds board while looking at the betting splits because this tells you a lot. This is a huge majority of how I do my bets. I would say I mostly play the market. I mostly look at the market, try and read between the lines, try and read between the tea leaves, and make plays on that. Very rarely are my plays backed in, like actual on-field stuff. I'm more of a market kind of guy. Different strokes for different folks. It is what it is. So right here, I'll give you an example. The Arizona Cardinals were 2.5-point dogs at home. Now they flipped to a 1-point favorite, 1.5 in some places. So I'm going to assume there's some pretty serious money, some pretty respected money on Arizona. So then I have to go back and think, okay, why am I not on Arizona, or what am I missing, or what's going on here? So, anyways, the betting splits are what's interesting because Dallas. So the handle is the amount of money on a game. The bets is the amount of tickets that are on a game. Dallas has 85% of money and 73% of the bets. Now, why is this notable? This is notable because if Dallas is getting 85% of money and 73% of bets, but the number has stayed the same, then this 15% that is on the Saints is pretty respected, I would think. Because if you're looking at this number, you would think, okay, well, then that means if you're seeing 85% handle on a game and 73% bets on a game, you're expecting the number to move. You're expecting it to go to 6.5. You're expecting it to go to 7. The fact that it is sat at 6 is absolutely notable. Now, if we saw this tick down, to Saints plus 5.5 with this kind of a split, that would be really notable. That's what we call in the business reverse line movement. So let's look at the game we just talked about, the Arizona game. Okay, so we have reverse line movement in the Arizona game. This is a very notable situation. 70% of tickets are on the Rams. 56% of money is on the Rams. Yet the line has moved from minus 2.5 to plus 1 for the Rams. So if this is the money, if this is the splits, why in the hell would the bookies turn the Rams from whatever it was, minus 2.5 to plus 1? I'll tell you why. Because there's some legitimate respect on the Cardinals. So right here, if you're just looking at this, you hate to be steam chasing, but you certainly couldn't play the Rams. So I like this for the Saints because I like this. I like the idea that there's a lot of respected money on the Saints holding this number. Now, again, we'll have to monitor that. I mean, it's Friday when I'm filming this, so limits are starting to open up. What that means is obviously, so if you're new to this racket, numbers are opened up early in the week from casinos. They have very short limits, which means you can't get down as much money as you could later on in the week. The reason books do that is because they use those small limit windows to maneuver the line. So if a really respected player comes in on Monday, hammers the Saints, hammers is asterisk because the limits would be low, but then the odds maker may turn around and say, hey, this group just took the Saints at this number, let's move it. And then as the week goes on, limits open up, but the line gets sharper. So limits are starting to open up a little bit here on a Friday. Obviously, if Dallas shoots to like -7, -7.5, by the time kickoff happens, all this conversation we're having right now is kind of moot. So definitely you'll be watching the board. Right now, I couldn't play the side. If I was advising you, I would say that if you like the Cowboys, you probably want to play them now. If you like the Saints, you probably want to wait. Because if Dallas is a public team, they're always a public team. Obviously, they're getting a lot of action right now anyways. Worst case scenario, this number probably sticks at 6. If you're and in best case scenario, if you're backing the Saints, maybe you get a 6.5, like a win, or maybe, I don't think it goes to 7, but maybe even get a rogue 7 or something like that. So that would be my recommendation on the side, would be chilling and waiting. If I had to bet the side right now with this information, I probably would bet the Saints. Because with this information, I'm sitting here thinking like this is a pretty serious line freeze with that kind of handle and bet split to keep the line at 6. So I probably would take the Saints. I haven't taken the Saints, but I probably would bet the Saints. But it looks like this number will go to 6.5. DK is shading -112 to Dallas. Win is already going that way. BetMGM's going that way. So I would assume this hits 6.5 if it moves today. So that's the side. As far as the total, you can do the exact same thing on the total. So you go up here to line type. We'll go to the total. It opened 44.5. People thought that was a little short. I agreed. I thought this game was going to have some points in it. I think I said on the preview videos we've done so far, I've said anywhere between 28 to 24, 27, 23, 24, 20. So I see a mid-40s, upper 40s kind of game. And it looks like the market agrees with me right now. So it opens 44.5. It goes up. Market-wide is 46.5. We look at the splits. 46.5. 87% of handle is on the over. 77% tickets are on the over. So, all this really tells me is that it's pretty much a consensus. Pretty much an agreement between the quote-unquote pros and the quote-unquote Joes that everyone's rushing to bet the over. Odds makers agree. Respected money on the over. Pushes it up 2 points. I would say if you like the over, take it now. Because I don't think with that kind of market sentiment, I don't think it's going to go the other way. So if you like the total, again, I would probably lean. You're really late to the party here. I don't think I would. 44.5, I'd like it. I liked it when it opened. But that's kind of where I sit on this. Somewhere in that corridor. It's not too far off, I'll say that. It's not too far off right now. The scores that I just gave out are right there. So I guess I would lean over. I'd lean over and the dog, which isn't always correlated, but okay. So now let's look at the power rankings. So people do this differently, but in general, the way you can do power rankings is you have 0 as an average team. Okay. Now you have the composite power rating is right here. So as you can see, San Francisco is 5.9. So San Francisco is on consensus because then you have like all the specific people. You have Fezzik, is unabated on here. You have Massey Peabody. You have Dave. Whatever. You have all these different power rankings into a consensus. So the 5.9 composite score is 5.9 points better than an average team. So if you do it just by this, the Saints are 12. This is week 2 of the NFL composite power ratings from Sam Hoppin, and he's got all these guys. So the Saints are 1 point better than an average team. The Cowboys are 3.5 points better on average. Okay. So right there, you're looking at that and you're saying there's a little value there, right? Because the Saints are getting 6 points. But there's certainly not 6-point difference right there. You throw in home field, I would give Dallas, let's call it, you could call it, I would say, I'd say 2 points, but that's probably high. Dallas is probably closer to like 1.5 points for home field, but I'll say 2. I think with New Orleans being close regionally, it's probably not 2. It probably is closer to 1.5. So if you give Dallas 1.5 or 1 for home field, that puts Dallas as like a 4-point favorite somewhere in there. So Dallas should be 4. Yeah. So you get value if you look at just the composite. And I think you can make an argument that this is high on the Saints and high on the Cowboys. If it was me, I don't think I'd have Dallas this high rated. I don't think I'd have the Saints this high rated. I think I'd have the Saints. They would probably, for me, be closer to an average team. So they'd be closer to like 0.2, 0.5 maybe. And I think Dallas would probably be closer to like 2.5 for me. Somewhere in there. Maybe drop them both a point, which I guess at that point it is kind of the same. It's still in that corridor of 4-ish points. So Dallas, if I was making the line, I would have Dallas as like a 4-point favorite. If you look at like Massey Peabody, like I said, unabated, super respected group, they would have Dallas. So they're higher on Dallas. They would have Dallas 5.1 points, and they would have the Saints. They're high on the Saints too, 3.1 points. So they would have this game. They would have this game probably around 3.5. So, but this is what I'm telling you is that when you wonder why this number isn't moving, and I'm saying these respected groups, if these respected groups are playing this game, so far they're playing the Saints. They're taking the 6.5 all day long. If their numbers are telling them this should be a 3.5, 4.5 point game, and you're getting 6.5. Now you could also argue that they're not playing the 6. They're playing the 6.5s, but regardless. Okay, so let's look at the box scores. Because something else we like to do is see if there's a Fugazi box score, right? If there was like the Bears were the example I gave last week, where the Bears are a very Fugazi box score is a bad win. Let's see the Cowboys. I got a feeling this will not be. So the Cowboys had a 4.4 yards per play. They were a full yard better. Okay, time of possession, about equal. Turnovers, they won the turnover margin by 2. Rushing yards, 4.1 yards a rush. Okay, on the other side, 2 for 15 on third down for Cleveland. Cleveland averaged, 3.3 yards per play. Decent clip running the ball, 4.9 yards a rush, 30 minutes of possession. So, yeah, I mean, you look at this right here. I will say this though, if you look at this box score, you could argue that this game probably shouldn't have been 33-17. I mean, you get you're +2 in the turnover margin with a defensive special team touchdown. Everything. I mean, Dallas absolutely should have won the game, but on first glance, like I don't think this equates to 33-17. This is probably closer. I would say this is closer to a 10-point win. I would say Dallas probably deserved something closer to 27-17 than 33-17. That's very. I mean, it's very small. Very small. That's a very minimal thing there. But overall, I would say maybe slightly exaggerated of a win, but still a deserved win. Obviously, Dak Prescott was not great. 19 for 32, 179 yards, touchdown. 4.7 yards a pass. I mean, Deshaun Watson, 2.7 yards a pass. My God. 6 sacks. Christ. Okay, so we go to the box score. Zeke, 10 for 40. Now, what this can do, we'll get to player props. So this is something else you got to think about. It's correlation. If you're doing player props, you want to try and figure out what's correlated. So if you like Dallas, if you think Dallas is going to dominate this game against the Saints, you probably don't want to take player props that are correlated with them winning the game. You don't want to take props like, Brandon Cooks to have 80 yards receiving, because it's like, well, if they're dominating the game, they're probably going to run the football. So then you'd look into players like Rico Dowdle, and you'd say, like, okay, well, I want to take Rico Dowdle props over, because in this game where they were dominating the game, he got 8 carries, 26 yards. So, that's kind of, now on the flip side, if you think Dallas is going to be losing, you want to take Dak Prescott's overs, because they're going to be throwing the ball around. And if you're taking Dak Prescott's overs, okay, well, who is he targeting? CeeDee Lamb 10 times. If he's throwing, he's probably targeting CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he had 19 completions, and he had 10 targets to CeeDee Lamb. So that's how you kind of correlate props, okay? And we will look at the props market as well. All right, Saints team stats, obviously complete domination. Now, if you look at this is one of those games where, it probably does equal pretty close to what happened. So you get the Saints 7 for 13 on third down, hold the Panthers to 1 for 10. The Saints are 6.1 yards per play. Panthers were 3.5, almost 3 yards better per play. Rushing, Saints limited the Panthers to 2.9 yards a rush. The Saints were 4.9 yards a rush. Red zone, 4 for 4. Turnovers, they're +2 in the turnover margin. There are 13 minutes of time of possession. So this right here is anything but fugazi. This is not only validates the Saints win, but it validates the Saints 37-point win as far as I'm concerned. So again, you can look at this with the Saints. Like, okay, what do the Saints do if they are up big? What do the Saints do if they are in control? If the Saints are in control, this is what they want to do. They want to run the ball 37 times. So then that's when you get into Jamal Williams carries. That's when you get into Alvin Kamara carries. Now you also look at, okay, how many times were people targeted? They were spread out pretty good. So the Alvin Kamara, 5 targets, 5 receptions. Foster Moreau, 4 and 4. Rashid, 5 and 3. Olave, 2 and 2. So you can deduce that those are very efficient routes. If everyone's being targeted pretty much the amount of their receptions, then you don't have to worry about, like, okay, I need this guy to have, whatever the volume is in order to get his receptions prop. So let's go to the props. All right, passing props. So they got, let's see, does DraftKings have their out? Surely they're out. Player special quarter. Let's see. May have to go to a different book. Okay, here you go. So this is rushing props. Okay, so Alvin is 50.5. Dak is 11.5. So let's look at Dak. Dak had 1 carry for 3 yards. Now the Saints are notoriously bad against mobile quarterbacks. So if we go back to last year, now I don't like going to the year before. Can I even do that? Let's go to the year before. I'm not a huge fan of doing this to going like the year before, because it's hard to know the carryover. Okay, so let's look at Dak Prescott game log 2023. Okay, so if you think the game is going to be close, you could look at Dak in close games. So you look at here, Miami 22-20, carried it 5 times. This game was close, 41-35, carried it 7 times. 28-23, carried it 6 times. 2017, carried it 7 times. So what are we learning right now? Right now we're learning in a close game, if he has to, he will run. And then you look at the blowouts. 38-10, 0 carries. 31-10, he's losing, so it's a little skewed, but 4 carries. 33-13, 3. 45-10, 1. 33-10, 2. 49-17, 2. 42-10, 1. 38-3, 1. 40-0, 1. So right here, we have our first kind of correlation. Okay? We have, I think the game is going to be close. I'm trying to say they have rush attempts. I think the game will be close. So if I think the game will be close, then that would lead me to Dak Prescott rushing overs. Okay. So I'm trying to find his attempts. I love attempts. They might not have them up yet, but 10.5 is the number here for Dak. I'd probably look at Dak over 10.5 rushing yards, or his rushing attempts is something I'd look at as well. So let's look at the running back. So you look at Kamara and Elliott. So Kamara is 50.5. Okay. Kamara got 883 on 15 carries last game with a 5.5 average. I would assume he'll probably get about the same volume because his volumes, the Saints are going to run the football anyways, okay? I think I'm going to get my calculator out. His volume is going to be stifled a little bit because I think they are still trying to kind of, get him back in to the flow since he missed all the camp and all that. But I mean, this is the Cowboys. They are absolutely going to run Kamara if they have to. So if he runs the ball 15 times, what was his number? 50.5. Okay, so let's see. So if he 50.5, so we need him to average somewhere around 3.5 yards a carry. If he averages 3.5 yards a carry and he gets 15 carries, he's right at it. He gets 52.5. Now we saw in the Cowboys game they gave up a little bit of rushing. They gave up a little bit of rushing to the Browns. Let's look at that box score again. So they gave up 3.7 to Jerome Ford. Now Watson's kind of skewing this a little bit. But let's just look at Jerome Ford. So they gave up 3.7 to Jerome Ford. Okay. So the question is, how much volume do you think Alvin Kamara gets? Now in a game like this, you also do kind of run into, if you think the Saints are going to be losing, which not crazy, right? Then maybe you're thinking, okay, well, Kamara might actually be used a lot in the receiving game. He might be used a lot over there. So his receiving numbers, so his receptions is 4.5. Now I kind of like that. Not going to lie. Because they got him the ball 5 times against the Panthers. And the whole second half, they're not getting him the ball. The whole second half, they're not throwing to Kamara. Why would they? The game's already in hand. So if they're willing to throw to him a handful of times in this game, you would think they're going to throw to him a handful of times against the Cowboys. And with the efficiency of the target to reception ratio for everybody, I kind of like that. Kind of like the idea of Alvin's over 4.5. You would also think, now let's keep going here. It's a masterclass. You would also have to factor in that Micah Parsons is going to be rushing the quarterback, or at least that's going to be a concern with the Saints offense. So if that's a concern for the Saints offense, you would then think that they're going to run a tremendous amount of short routes, a tremendous amount of screens, short routes, quick routes, get the ball out of Derek Carr's hand, or there will be an outlet for a flat pass or check down or whatever if Carr has to get rid of the ball. That also should help this number of over 4.5. That also should help the receiving for Alvin Kamara. Now, if you look at CeeDee Lamb, okay, CeeDee Lamb, 7.5 receptions. Last week, he went under that. Now, the Cowboys were in control, but if you look at the spread, 6.5, you're expecting the Cowboys to be in control again. Now, Dak was bad. Dak was 19 for 32. CeeDee did get 10 targets, so he definitely has the volume. But 8 catches is what you need to lose this. So let's see if there's any. Let's see if there's any like prior history between CeeDee and Marshawn. I'll have to go back a little bit. Regular season. Let's see, CeeDee Lamb. Okay. Let's see, 2021, 2022. So can we go to... All right, how do I do this here? Game log. There it is. All right. You want to see any time, if there was ever a time where him and Marshawn played against each other. Okay, right here, 27-17. So in this game, was in New Orleans, 27-17. CeeDee had 13 targets, 7 receptions on 13 targets. So he had a ton of volume, 13 targets. Now you got to make sure, this is kind of hard to do, but you got to make sure that Marshawn was playing. He was. Marshawn was in there. So this was their last matchup. Was 13 targets, 7 receptions, goes under the number. So what you can learn from this is that they're not afraid to throw at him. They're not afraid to throw at Marshawn. So the volume could be there. I would probably lean under because you have 2 things working against you if you're a CeeDee Lamb over backers. One, Marshawn Lattimore, where you just saw the last meeting, he had 13 targets and couldn't get over this number. The second thing is that the game script is calling that the Cowboys are going to win the game pretty handily. All right, they're a 6.5 point home favorite. So if they're up big, why would they be throwing a CeeDee Lamb? Okay. So that's a thought right there. Probably lean the under there. As far as the Saints, let's look at receptions. So we talked about Kamara. Olave, 4.5. He only had 2 and 2 last game. I would lean over here because of the game script. The game script calls for Carr to be throwing it because they're going to be down. He's going to get Olave involved. The more they throw it, the more he's going to get involved. The question is, do you think Olave will get 6-ish targets to get 5 receptions? That's the question there. Juwan Johnson over 2.5, Rashid over 3.5. I couldn't recommend any of them because they spread the ball out so much once it gets past Kamara and Olave. It'd be tough to do that. I would rather take CeeDee Lamb. 88.5 kind of correlated here. I was going to say I would rather take 88.5 than over 7.5, but 88.5 for 8 is kind of right on that number, that average, that like 11 yards a carry number, or 11 yards a reception number. Let's see. Okay, so then we have a bunch of head-to-heads, all that stuff, most receiving yards. Yeah. Let's see, passing props. Okay. So we looked at rushing, we looked at receiving. Rushing-wise, we talked about Kamara. So Elliott's 39.5. What do you have, 10 on 40? In the Browns game, I think is what it was. I believe that's what it was. Almost certain it was 10 for 40. Let's see. Yeah, he had 10 for 40. Okay, so if you're seeing this and you're seeing 39.5, question is, does he get 12 carries? Do you think Ezekiel Elliott gets 12 carries? I would argue no. I would argue he does not. Because I think Dowdle will get a plenty of carries. Not to mention, like, the Saints just showed that they can really stop the run. Granted, it's the Panthers, but still. Do you expect? You're going to need. I think you're going to need. If Zeke averages 3.8, let's just say. Yeah, you need. You're going to need 11 carries. So, I think it's a question of volume, personally. I just don't know if he gets there. 3.8. It's 41.8. That still seems like a lot. Like 3.8 almost seems like a lot. Let's see 3.5. 3.5. You need 12. So do you think Zeke will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 13, 10 to 14 carries? If you believe that, then maybe you take his over. But I don't think so. So I would not be taking his over. I would not be touching it. Jamal Williams, he's interesting because as long as they are going to run him And what I mean by that is as long as Alvin Kamara is still in this kind of like slowly ramp up period where Jamal's going to get 10 to 12 carries, like his numbers are going to be interesting. But I think in this game, like this is the kind of game where you keep Kamara on the field. Now, Zeke being 39.5 and Dowdle being 35.5 is interesting. They must expect Dowdle to have much more of a load. Pause. Let's go to passing, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so Dak is over 254.5. Carr is over 219.5. Both are over 1.5 touchdowns. Dak much higher than Carr. Yeah, I mean pretty decent numbers, TBH. Because you look at Carr's game last week, and it's like this is like the best game, one of the best games he could possibly play. And he had 200 yards. Now I understand that they didn't throw because they're up 47-10, but it is also kind of difficult to find that extra. I mean, it's like, yeah, he didn't throw a lot, but when he did throw, it's probably the best possible game you could ask for. So I think this is strictly correlated. If you think the Saints are going to lose this game, and you think the Saints are going to lose pretty significantly by like a touchdown, then I think you take this over. Because if the Cowboys are up 10 points in the third quarter, fourth quarter, Carr's going to be letting it rip. Now, if you think this is a close game, if you think the Saints have a chance to win this game, I would be very hesitant to take Carr's over. Because if the game is close, if the game is tight, this game shows you that the Saints are absolutely willing to run the football and absolutely willing to chew clock. Clint Kubiak in that first game, he was eating up the clock. So I'd be very hesitant about Carr. As far as Prescott, you could argue that this is a bit deflated because of just how inefficient he was. I mean, 19 for 32. He averaged 5.6. Let's see what he averaged last year. Again, I hate to use last year's stats, but sometimes it's all you got. Let's go to Dak. Stats. Regular season. Okay, here you go. So 2023, he averaged 7.7. Okay. So, he's never averaged 5.6 in his career. The lowest he's averaged is 6.8. So you would assume this is going to be bumped up, I would say at the floor, 7. 7-ish, somewhere in there. That sounds about right. Let's take a look. So a game where he averaged close to 7 would be like here in this win. Now this is a shootout, so this might be a bad example. Even here, this is probably a good example right here. The Jets game at home. So this is kind of the game script. This is kind of the game script. So 30-10 at home. So the Cowboys are winning relatively big. Dak throws it 31 for 38. Hell of a game on that side. 255, 6.7 average. So 255, what's he at here? Now, ladies and gentlemen, do you see how the sausage is made? We're sitting here and we're like, all right, what's the right game script? What's the right average? What's the right this? Okay, what's that equal? 255. Then all of a sudden over 254.5. Ladies and gentlemen. So, okay, so that tells you what they think. It'll be closer to like this. This game right here, 7 average, a win comfortably at home. Those are your variables that you got to look at when you're, because like if you do this one, let's see. Like if you do this one, right? And you're like, oh, well, what about Philly? He had 374 yards passing. And it's like, well, the first variable is that it's on the road. First variable is that it's outside. Second variable is that it's a loss. So already it's not a parallel comparison. So you got to look for at home, which they are at home this week, and in a win, which they are projected to be in a win. Now, they certainly could lose, but, So I think this Jets game and this Philly game, this Detroit game is a little bit of an anomaly because of how high the average was. 9.1 is way high. That's way higher than his average. So that's kind of an anomaly. He's closer to a 7 to a 7.5 is like what you're looking for. So yeah, this Philly game, 24 for 39, 271, and this Jets game, 31 for 38, 255 is closer to what I think Dak can do. Now, the Jets is a really good example because how good the Jets defense is. At this part of the year, though, but then you have Philly. Philly's defense is awful and was awful at the end of the year. So, yeah, I mean, this Jets game is, granted, it's like the week after the Jets were dejected after Aaron Rodgers got hurt, so you got to factor that in as well. But Jets defense is really good, and you can look at the Jets defense very similarly to the Saints with Sauce Gardner and Marshawn Lattimore. So I think this is a great example of what you'd expect from Dak. So I kind of like his over. I think I'd lean Dak's over. So right now, I haven't made any bets on this game. It's Friday. Still got to dig into it. But I would lean Alvin Kamara receptions. I would lean Dak carries or rushing yards. I would lean CeeDee Lamb receptions under. I would lean Dak Prescott passing yards over. And I would lean Saints plus the points. And I would wait. I would wait, and I would take the 6.5. And God, if it got to 7, but that's what I would look at right now. But this I hope this kind of gave you a really big overview of like how you can look at games. And we did this really quick, but I mean, this was 40 minutes of just kind of going through everything, going through the odds, the splits, the props, the power rankings, the box scores, the past performances. Now, the kicker is when you're handicapping, you got to do this like basically every day. Now, obviously, you don't have to go through this every day. You only do this once. But you do have to go through the splits every day. You do have to go through the market moves every day. You do have to go through the Vegas odds board every day. You do have to go through this every day. You have to make sure, okay, have they moved the numbers on me? It was 254. Oh, now it's 261. Oop, 261 kind of falls out of that average of what I was looking at with the past performance. Okay, now it's not a play. So it's tough, man. It's tough. But I hope you enjoy this. I know a lot of people ask me like, hey, let's see some bets. Let's see it all. So I thought, well, instead of just coming on here and being like, bet number 1, bet number 2, let's walk through it. Let me actually give you a little bit of insight of what I'm like, how I'm looking at this, what I'm looking for, things like that. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. Or again, if you have any questions about whatever. There's plenty of odds boards out there. I use VSiN. VSiN's great. I love their service. Would highly recommend VSiN for sure. And populate your Twitter as much as you can with this. Like, populate your Twitter as much as you can with the big dogs. The unabateds of the world, the Fez, Steve Fezzik, and like that's what you want. You want this on your timeline. You want this on your timeline. You don't want all the other stuff that's out on social media. So, but yeah, I enjoy this. I always like the gambling conversation. So if you enjoyed it, let me know. Thank you very much for watching. Happy betting. Let me know what you bet on. And I will see you in the next video.